Hello, friends. I'm Andrea, aka Drea, and welcome to my laboratory. Today we will be dissecting cookies, chocolate chip cookies to be exact, and we are going to learn the baking and science behind chocolate chip cookies. I'm very excited to be here with you, and I can't wait to tell you all about what we're going to do. Today we're going to learn about the creaming method, which is the way we put the ingredients together. All of the ingredients, we're going to break down what we will be adding to make our dough, what the ingredients are, why they're important to the dough, and also how they work together. Last but not least, mise en place, which means everything in its place. So what we're going to do is gather all of our stuff, all of our ingredients, and get going. So grab your lab coats and let's go. Okay, so I just finished gathering all of the ingredients and the equipment that we need for baking cookies. You want 2 separate bowls. A mixer, if you have a hand mixer, is great. If you have a stand mixer, that's great as well. You can even do this by hand if you wanted to, which is the original way of doing things. But if you have something electric, that will very much help you out during our baking process. I also grabbed our all-purpose flour, baking soda, salt. I have here in this bowl 2 sticks of butter that have been softened. I just let them sit out at room temperature. We have sugar, regular cane sugar or white sugar, brown sugar. I have vanilla that's available, 2 large eggs that I also put into a bowl, and I'm letting set out for a little bit too. Usually you would want your ingredients to sit out at room temperature for a little bit. Cold ingredients aren't the best to work with. There is a purpose behind that. The way that the ingredients work together, depending on their temperature, has an effect on that. Last but not least, the most important part, I think, which are our chocolate chips. So, right before gathering all these ingredients, I did set the oven temperature to 375. So that is preheating while we put our dough together. And most importantly, I washed my hands. You always want to practice good hygiene, hand hygiene in the kitchen, as well as putting up any long hair. Keeping everything covered. The apron isn't just for your protection, or keeping your clothes clean. It is for protection as well, in case something hot splatters or anything like that. So it's good to put an apron on. Oh, oven is ready. So that's great. If you haven't worked in an oven before, I recommend having an adult, or highly encourage, obviously, to have an adult work with you in the kitchen side by side, so they can guide you and help you during this process. So let's get going. So here I have 2 sticks of butter that have been softened. You want 1 cup or 8 ounces of butter. I'm just going to put this to the side for right now. We'll get to that in a second. Here I have a smaller mixing bowl, and what I'm going to add to this are our dry ingredients. We need 2 1/4 cups of all-purpose flour. All-purpose flour is made usually of a hard and soft wheat, and so that helps with gluten development, which is going to add to our structure in our cookie dough. So here I'm going to do the scoop and level method. We want to make sure that we have a dry measuring cup. So these types of measuring cups, they are for dry ingredients usually. If something or if a recipe calls for liquid, like a cup of water or a cup of milk, you want to use a liquid measuring cup. So here we're going to use our dry measuring cups and we're going to do the scoop and level, which basically means we're going to over scoop our flour, just as so, easy. And then we're going to take the back of a butter knife. And let's see, I hope you can see that. Yeah. We're just going to level that out, just scoop it right over the top, so it lays even with the top of the measuring cup. So we need 2 of these. And then we need a 1/4 cup. If you are gluten-free, you can use a 1-to-1 gluten-free flour in this recipe as well, which would be helpful. So 2 1/4 cups of flour. You always want to make sure that you're measuring your ingredients very precisely. Baking is super important. Doing that in baking is very important because of the way that the ingredients act together. So you got 2 1/4 cups of flour. We're going to do a teaspoon of baking soda. So when a recipe calls for, it has 1 and it has like a smaller case T, that means teaspoon. So that's the smaller one of these. And we're going to do a teaspoon of baking soda. Again, doing that scoop and level measuring technique. Baking soda is a chemical leavener. So it means that it's made by humans, and it's going to help rise the cookies. It's going to give, make the dough expand. For baking soda, you need an acid to help activate it. And that can come in many different forms: yogurt, lemon juice. Today, our acid for the cookie dough is going to be chocolate chips. Chocolate is an acid, so that's going to react with the baking soda and from the heat of the oven, and with the liquid from the eggs, and that is going to help activate that chemical leavener to make the cookies rise. We also need a teaspoon of salt. Salt is a little bit of a preservative, and it also enhances the flavors in your baked goods. So it's really important to not forget that step. So here I have, again, 2 1/4 cups of all-purpose flour, teaspoon of baking soda, and 1 teaspoon of salt. What I'm going to do is mix those dry ingredients together, and this helps distribute the baking soda and the salt so it's a more even dough. So just mix that up just till you feel like it's going to be all good. Give it about 10 seconds or so. Just about. You can see. So in our larger bowl, we're going to add the 2 sticks of butter, 1 cup. Again, I have this softened. We have 3/4 cups of sugar. And then here we also have 3/4 cups of packed brown sugar. And I'll show you how to pack the brown sugar in. So you just get your 1/4 cup measuring cup. And in the bag, I just level it off and then I pack it in. Just added that 1/4 cup of packed brown sugar to what I already had to make 3/4 cups of packed brown sugar. And again, I just scooped it into the bag and patted it flat until it was compact. What sugar does is it enhances the texture, makes things tender and soft. It also caramelizes your baked goods and adds color to it. It also reduces gluten development in the baked goods. Gluten, which is part of the structure or helps develop the structure in a baked good, it reduces that in cookies or other baked goods as well, because sugar is hygroscopic, which means it bonds to water particles. So for gluten to develop, you need liquid and protein, gluten like wheat protein. And because the sugar bonds to the water, it prevents that gluten development because the liquid is a little bit hindered. So now we're going to do the creaming method, which we have all of our ingredients together, and this is what's important. So we have our fat and our sugar. Butter, what butter does is it adds a nice mouthfeel to your baked goods. It moisturizes it, and it also helps to leaven the product. So we have our butter and our sugar, and what the sugar and the butter is going to do is when we cream it, we want it at a medium speed. We don't want it too high because we don't want to destroy our air bubbles, and we don't want it too low because we need enough friction and energy to create those air bubbles. So the butter and the sugar are going to combine and create these air bubbles that are going to help leaven the product and create our dough. So let's get going. Whoops, got a little spillage there, but that's okay. Just gonna switch bowls, I think. All is well, switch the bowls. So what I'm going to do is cream the butter and the sugar together until it's light and fluffy, again, at a medium speed. So if you're using a handheld mixer, about a 1 or a 2. And if you're using a stand mixer, you want it on 2, which is the creaming setting. So this is about after a minute of mixing, and I need it to be a little bit more light and fluffy. We want to incorporate that air so it helps to leaven the dough, and we're just not quite there yet. My butter was a little bit cold, so I just heated up a tiny bit. I can't stress enough how much importance it is to make sure that your butter is room temperature. You don't want it melted because then the air won't be able to incorporate into the butter. And you don't want it too cold for the same exact reason. We wouldn't be able to generate enough air bubbles into the dough. So I'm just going to mix this for a little bit longer until it's a little bit fluffier. So here is the final stage of creaming the butter and the sugars together. We had the regular cane sugar and the brown sugar. The difference between cane sugar and brown sugar is that brown sugar has molasses added to it. So it just adds a different flavor to the baked good. It took a little bit longer than I would have anticipated because of the temperature of my butter. And during the mixing process, I took a break to make sure to scrape the sides of my bowl and also to get the bottom of it as well. I like to do this during all stages of my baking process, just to make sure that all the ingredients are being incorporated and nothing really is missed. So, butter and sugar, and then we have our 2 eggs. And we're going to add these eggs one at a time. We want to add one, incorporate it into the sugar and butter mix, and make sure that it's all emulsified. That is one thing that eggs do, is it emulsifies everything. It brings the whole product together. It mixes everything in. Eggs also add moisture and color to our final product as well. Eggs are made out of 2 parts, which are the egg whites, also known as the albumin, and the egg yolks. The yolks contain a fat, and what the fat does is it coats the particles in the mixture that we have, and that helps to hold liquids in our products. Right now in the chocolate chip cookies, there aren't too many liquids. We have some vanilla, but if you're making a cake or something that calls for liquids like milk or water, the egg yolk is going to help encapsulate that liquid if it is mixed correctly. So we'll add our 1 egg at a time, and then mix that in all together. And we want to make sure that when we are doing this, in the next phase, we also are continuing to scrape the bottom and the sides of our mixing bowl. Just right before the second egg is all incorporated, I like to add my vanilla. So we can just get that in together. At this part in the cookie making process, for chocolate chip cookies specifically, you don't have to worry about any gluten development. Once we add our flour, that's when we want to pay attention to not overmixing. So right now, I'm going to add my teaspoon of vanilla. And vanilla is a flavor enhancer. It's going to make it taste extra yummy. And we're going to continue to mix and scrape our bowl. So we're looking out for, I can see like little specks of yellow from the egg yolk, and you can see when the egg is first added, the sugar and the butter sort of like separated. But if you keep mixing, it'll all come together. That's what eggs do. They emulsify. They bring the things together, the ingredients. And we're just going to pay attention to what our mixture is looking like. So I see some egg yolk on the side that I want to scrape down. And it's not completely emulsified yet. What else the eggs are going to do is help give it some rise as well in the oven. So the egg whites are made a lot out of water, or a big portion of it is made out of water. And when that reacts with the heat of the oven, along with the baking soda and what have you, the egg whites, the moisture in the egg whites are going to evaporate and then cause air bubbles to rise. Again, we have our sugar and our butter, creamed that together till it was light and fluffy. We added 1 egg at a time, mixed it together, make sure it's all incorporated. We added our second egg. Right before that was incorporated, we added our vanilla and incorporated that all together. So here I like to switch to hand mixing. It just helps give control to the gluten development. And so what I like to do is I add a big majority of the flour at first, because this is going to get a majority of it incorporated into it. If you are making a cake, there are certain methods that you want to add the flour and switch off the liquid, but for chocolate chip cookies, I like to add a big majority of the cookies first, or the flour first. I don't do it until it's all incorporated, because we don't want we want to add all the flour into the dough and incorporate that all at once, so we're not developing too much gluten, because we want our cookies to be tender. So I just mix it a little bit with the hand mixer. I will scrape down my bowl, the bottom and the sides, and we'll add the rest of the flour. Mix that up a little bit, then switch to hand mixing. We add our 2 1/4 cups of flour in here, our baking soda, and our salt from earlier. You want to make sure to turn the hand mixer, or whatever mixer you have, on very slowly when you add flour or anything like that, because like you can see, you get flour all over the table, or just poofs right in your face. What I'm going to do now is just to measure out my chocolate chips, because I am going to mix this dough by hand. They need 2 cups of chocolate chips. I'm privy to less chocolate chips. You might think that I'm, who doesn't like a lot of chocolate? But I appreciate a nice equal amount of dough to chocolate, if not more dough than less chocolate. But it's totally what your preference is. Some people like a lot of chocolate chips. You could also add, I've used peanut butter chocolate chips before, which is fun. There's white chocolate chips you can use. And also recipes you can use nuts in them as well. It's a good base dough to kind of experiment with and see, different flavors. You got your whole dough method down. You can add different dried fruits and what have you. But today we're going to use 2 cups of chocolate chips. I'm just going to incorporate this. I'm going to use my hands. They're clean. And I just like to get a feel for the dough and mix it all together. To me, switching to my hand, I do have more control over how much I'm working the dough. We don't want a lot of gluten development in our cookies at all, because we want our cookies to be nice and tender. So I'm just incorporating that. And you can kind of see, I have almost a fully formed dough here, but there's a little bit extra. Looks almost like sand. So at this point, you can even do a little bit before. I'm going to add the chocolate chips. I personally think adding the chocolate chips after, or right before all the dough is fully formed, you have less of a chance of developing a lot of gluten as well. We want to make sure we don't get it, leave anything on the bottom. There's no dry ingredients, chunks of anything left on the sides of the bowl, and all of our chocolate chips are incorporated. So right now I'm just going to scrape off any extra dough back into the bowl, and then I'm going to wash my hands so that we can go to the next step. So here I have my baking sheet. Whatever you have on hand is perfectly fine. I think this is a regular 8x10. I have my tools to scoop the cookies. I have this handy ice cream scoop. It's like a small medium ice cream scoop that makes a very uniform cookie, which is very nice. And I also have 2 teaspoons that you can grab the dough and scoop onto the baking sheet. You can also use your hands too. It's totally up to you. I like to use the ice cream scoop. Just gives it a little bit rounder edge and whatnot, which I like. But yeah, you can do it if you want some messy chocolate chip cookies. Not even messy, it's just fun. Whatever you want to do, go with what your heart's desire. They're gonna look great, taste great, and it's just exciting to eat. So I lined my baking sheet with this baking mat that I had bought. It's a non-stick baking mat. It's also called a Silpat. And what this does is protect the cookies from sticking. You can also use, there's like non-stick pans that you can use. I tend to just spray them down or use a little bit of butter to make sure that they don't stick. You can also use parchment paper if you like as well. If you have one of these, great. If not, no big deal. So what I do is just, I'm going to take my dough and make sure that it's an even level there, and I'm just going to scoop it onto the baking mat. So I just scooped out the rest of the cookie doughs. I probably have maybe 1 inch or 1.5 inches between each one, and I can dollop a few in between as well. If you're going to use the spoons, you can just take a scoopful of cookie dough and scoop it right onto your baking mat. If you're using these, or if you're using your hands, it's important to keep the dough uniform at the same size because you want all your cookies to bake at the same time. If you're going to use your hand, I would just take a scoop of the dough. You can just round it out a little bit too. Have nice, beautiful dough balls and stick it right on there. Let's stick them in the oven. So I have my oven set at 375, and I'm going to stick my cookies into the oven. I'm going to put them right on the top rack. Nope, it's going to do the bottom rack. Change my mind. And I'm going to stick them right into the middle of it. I'm going to set the timer for about, I'm going to say 6 minutes. It should take anywhere between 8 to 12 minutes for the cookies to bake. The reason why I'm going to set the timer for 6 minutes is because in the middle of the baking, I want to rotate my pan and just check to see how the cookies are doing. So the heat from the oven is going to help all of the ingredients react together. It's going to give rise to the air bubbles that we created in the creaming method. And it's also going to help the baking soda activate with the chocolate chips as well. And it's all going to transform the dough into our chocolate chip cookie. In the meantime, what I like to do is tray up a next batch of my chocolate chip cookies to get that ready. I also like to clean up after that, just to give myself a head start. So I have the remainder of my dough, and what I would do is tray up my next batch of cookies to have that ready to pop into the oven when I'm done. But right now for myself, I'm going to tray up these chocolate chip cookies and then put them in the freezer so I can bake them, really bake them at a later time. This cookie dough recipe makes about, depending on the size that you make them, an average cookie would make about, I believe it's 5 dozen cookies. So you have a lot of cookies. That means got a lot of cookies, means you can share with a lot of people, which is always a thumbs up. What I like to do is freeze the cookies and have them ready for future use. If you have somebody come over to play, put a few cookies in the oven, get yourself a nice glass of milk or some tea, whatever you would like, and have a tea party perhaps. That would be cool. But this also just gives you the capabilities to have cookies at at a future time. They don't have to be spaced out or anything because we're just going to put them into the freezer. They will freeze, and then eventually I will put them into a plastic bag. I freeze them first because we don't want them all sticking together in a plastic bag. So my timer just went off, and I'm going to rotate the tray in the oven. You can kind of see that the cookies are spread out and baking up. So I just want to quickly, without releasing too much heat, open the oven door, rotate the tray, and keep that baking for a little bit longer. This is the point in time whenever you're working with heat or any sharp objects, you always want to make sure that there is an adult present, guiding you, supporting you during this so that you are safe and everybody else is safe. So always make sure to have an adult around. So let's just do that. Oops. They're gonna be chocolate chip cookie cakes. I'm just gonna pull these out. They are spreading more than I thought they would, so they're spreading into each other. So you want to space the next ones out a little bit more. They're looking good. They got some brown around the edges, but you can see that, I can see that the tops are still a little bit moist, and what we're looking for is the nice brown color, and also for them to be dried out. So I'm going to set the timer for probably about another 2 minutes just to check on them, and we'll see what the color looks like, and we'll see what the tops look like as well. So what's happening is the sugar is caramelizing, the eggs are cooking, and we're getting that nice brown color. So again, 2 minutes, and we'll check them again. One thing to pay attention to when you're cooking in your own oven, ovens have hot spots. So what you're doing when you're baking is there's a heat is coming from the bottom of the oven as well as the top, and then it's circulating to have the heat around the product. If you were broiling, heat would just come from the top. But because we're baking, it's coming from all around, and sometimes in ovens they have certain hot spots, and you want to just be mindful and pay attention to if your oven runs hot, if it runs cold, and where your hot spots may be. One way to look for that is to put a piece of parchment onto a baking tray and just stick it in there for a few minutes, and you can see it brown in different spots. So if you have a brown spot in, let's say, the back left corner of your parchment, then you know the back left corner of your oven runs hotter. It's a hot spot. And so you just pay attention because you want to rotate the pan, you want to change the direction so it's not just baking hotter on that side for the whole time. Sometimes you can even switch racks too if you're just baking one tray at a time. If you're baking 2 trays at a time, what you do is you rotate the pan and you can switch the racks as well. So if you have cookie racks at home and they're available to you, now's a great time to get them onto a surface with a heating pad underneath, a pot holder, and that's where we're going to put the cookie trays onto. It's going to help cool the cookies faster. I did check the timer. It went off after 1 minute and the cookies weren't quite ready yet. So I set it for another minute and it's about to go up. There it is. So I'm going to check the cookies, see what they look like, and if they're ready to come out. They have a nice, really nice color to them. This is sort of what I'm looking for. I think if you can see it. They're still a little bit moist on top, and they're not as cakey as I want them to be, so I'm going to put them in for another minute or so. I'm going to rotate the pan again and put them onto the top rack as well. So altogether, it's been about 8 minutes. I'm going to put them in for, let's say, 1 more minute, so about 9 minutes, and then we're going to check. So my timer just went off, and that was for the extra minute. So it's been about 9 minutes so far, and I just want to check the cookies quickly so not too much heat comes out, just to see where we're at with color and moisture. Okay, these look a little bit better. So I'm just testing the middle of the cookies to see how moist they are and the texture of it as well. They will continue to bake onto the pan. And these look, for me, a nice color. I like cookies a little bit underbaked, so as they continue to cook, they are settled onto the pan, they will continue to cook. So got a nice color, nice even brown edges, and brown color on top as well. And they all look pretty uniformly done. So I'm just going to set that onto the rack to cool for about maybe a minute or so they continue to bake, and then after I'm going to transfer them to a cookie rack so the air can flow through the bottom of the rack and cool the cookies quickly. So I let them rest on the baking sheet for a minute or two, and now I'm just going to transfer them over to the cooling rack. This will help to cool them down faster so we can eat them a little bit quicker. It's okay that they're sticking together. They smell delicious. Part of eating or cooking or baking specifically has a lot to do with our senses. Texture is a big thing when we feel the product, or when we taste the product. Smell is a big thing. Everything, all the senses have its importance. Seeing with your eyes, feeling, hearing. What does a cookie sound like when you bite it? Or can you snap it? Is it chewy? What color is it? What does it feel like? What does it smell like? Take the time to recognize it. It's an exciting endeavor when you bake something. You know what the purposes are behind the thing that you're doing, and also enjoying when your final product. It's very exciting. I don't think I can wait any longer, so I'm just going to break open into this hot chocolate chip cookie. I don't know if you can see, but you can see all melting. We have very nice melted chocolate chips. The color on the bottom is quite beautiful. Nice golden brown. They're a little too hot to eat right now, but we shall come back to that in a few minutes. Just let them cool a few more minutes while I was cleaning up, and had a special friend pop into the kitchen. And food is my favorite when we're sharing. So cheers. Cheers to you. Cheers to you. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Wow. Chocolate's still melty. It's a bit warm, which is perfect, I think.
Soft in the middle.
Soft in the middle.
Slight little crunch on the end.
Exactly.
Perfect.
Yeah, there you go.
It's the perfect cookie.
Grab yourself some coffee, grab yourself some milk, whatever you like.
Mm-hmm.
I appreciate the salt really does enhance, I think, all the flavors. So
Yeah.
I taste a little bit of the salt, which I think is really nice. But here's to you. Here's to you.
To you and all of you.
All of you in the neighborhood. Happy baking.
Yay.
Stay happy, stay healthy, and stay safe. Enjoy.